And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Regina Meredith, former anchor and network sports broadcaster that has worked for both NBC and PBS. She's currently the host of Open Minds on Gaia, and she is here to talk about her new book, The Future Human: New Ways of Being and Living on Earth. Regina, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Well, thank you, Jeff. You're a very gracious host, so I'm looking forward to this. And to be accurate about it, it's mine and Lee Harris's book.
That's true. I should have
Book
said that.
with the Z's. Yes.
Lee hasn't been a guest of mine. And can we first start with who are the Z's?
The Z's are a collective of disembodied beings. Some of them have, and it's a group of beings, much as with Esther Hicks in the Abraham group, Sheila Gillette in the Theo group, very similar in that they're guides that are particularly associated with Lee. And when you're with a soul group like that, you've usually traveled through forever with them. That's part of your soul group. So you've been together since the beginning. So the Z's have been with him quite a long time, and some of them have incarnated upon rare occasions. So they do have a sense and understanding of what it's like to be embodied here on Earth, but not all of them. So they speak as a collective through him and essentially tapped him in when he was a young man. He was on his path to being a musician. He was a wonderful businessman, figuring out how to make it all work. And basically, they started talking to him and said, well, we have a little detour for you. And so he ended up becoming a channel, which he was initially surprised at and a little self-conscious about, but became more and more skilled as time went on. And I consider him to be a really amazing, clear channel. And he's also a friend and just a very kind, thoughtful, articulate, lovely human being.
Well, how did you collaborate with him on this book? Like, did you get together and he would channel and you would ask questions?
Yeah, we talked about it beforehand. Lee and I had chatted. We chatted because we're friends, and he had said, "I'd love to do a book with you one day." And we were just, it was just an idea we were tossing around a couple of years ago. And then it turned out we were both going to be in Windsor, in England. I was going to be in London. He was going to be in Windsor at the same time. And we knew about that a few months in advance. And he said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get together there and do a book? And I said, yeah, it would be delightful. And that's when he said, what do you think, as the interviewer, as a person that asked the questions, what do you think would be a really interesting topic? And I said, let me go think about that. So I meditated on it and thought about it for a day or two. And I said, you know what? For me, it's about our future as human beings, because we're told so many things about our future, that the future is dire, that our mere existence is killing our planet, and so forth. A lot of negative feedback about what we are as humans. And I know from my own soul collective group that they've been with me forever, and chatting with them starting 40 years ago, I knew that that's not the case. Human beings are a beautiful and unique species that are watched by many throughout the universe. And so I said, let's talk about our future. And what do you think? And he said he loved the idea. So we got together, and then it was my job to go and meditate and think about it and assemble basically an outline in 6 chapters. I think it's 6 chapters for the book. And then just literally I meditated my way into all of the questions. And then by the time I arrived, the hard work for me was done. Then Lee had to channel, and then we were both out of body the whole time. In fact, the second day, Lee got into a fender bender because when he's channeling, he's gone, right? And he's just loopy afterward. And meanwhile, I am in that semi state myself. I have to stay here enough to be able to refer to my questions, but I'm also really integrating with and following the Z's to the extent where I'm halfway out there. So at the end, we were just like, where's some food? We're dizzy. So this went on for a few days. And interestingly, we've been getting feedback from people who had the advanced copies of the book either to listen to or read, myself included. It happened to me first, and I didn't know it was happening to other people, that in the first chapter, as they're listening to the book, in my case, reading the book, they were finding the same thing. They were getting a little dizzy, a little out of body. and expansive as Pamela Gregory. When she listened to it a few times, and she was finding she just kept expanding outward. So we were having this odd effect. So the Z's were doing their work, because I noticed then later in the chapter, I had to read it 3 or 4 times because I couldn't remember anything. I was so out of it. And they said, you might find you're feeling your frequency shift as you're reading these words. And I thought, yeah, thank you. So Lee and I, our job was just to try to stay in our bodies and navigate our way back to his apartment and my hotel room.
Well, as somebody who's interviewed thousands of people for
Yeah.
many, many years, have you ever felt like you were out of body while interviewing them?
Oh,
Besides Lee?
this was unique because we were wound up together out there. Usually the person I'm interviewing is not wound up and out there. They're centered in their story and what they need to do. So it's a little more stable situation. But I can say that most of the time I go into what you would call a mildly altered state when I do interviews. My priority is the connection with the other person. So I put a lot of energy, especially at Gaia, where you're sitting across. In fact, I even designed my desk there so I could have the closest proximity to the person. So you're in each other's field. And my intention is, when I'm doing, first of all, you don't see it on camera because it's edited out, but when the interview begins, I close my eyes and check out who's in the room with us, which guides are there. I can sense their guides and I know mine, and just to kind of see what the background is like. And then when we start, I'm totally into the other person. And that does take me away from myself because I have to be listening to my intuition, paying attention to my script, and following their story. So it's like 3 different leads to take me into the story with them. But it's really a kind of love that happens where you give yourself over to the other person's energy to a large extent, but I have to maintain enough to conduct the conversation. So I was very much commingling, and I'm embarrassed to say, oftentimes at the end, I don't remember a lot.
Mm,
You know, I've read the books beforehand and I've constructed the interview, but I have to go off that because I often cannot remember the interviews
mm.
very well at all because of that thing happening.
Well, did your guides have a part in your own spiritual journey and for you to leave broadcast and to go into Gaia?
Oh, sure. I never wanted to be in broadcasting. Everything kept pushing me that way. I did it when I was first married when I was young, to a man. He said, "Do you" I didn't know anything about myself at all. I was just following every curiosity and, you know, swimming upstream, just kind of checking life out, and I didn't have any kind of plan. I was 19 years old. And he said, "Do you have any idea you're smart?" And I thought, "No one's ever told me that, actually." So that was a revelation. I thought, "Well, okay. I'm not sure what I'm to do with that." And then he said, "You really should go into broadcasting or something, do something with your mind and with your life." So I went to journalism, to school and studied journalism at University of Nevada, Reno. But it was shortly after that that he suggested to me that I go and apply for this job as a ski reporter at a station in Sacramento, KCRA, which was a large market. And we were living at Lake Tahoe and listening to people lie about the ski conditions, where they're talking about packed powder. It's like it just ruined my skis on rocks that day, right? And so he said, "Why don't you go do that?" And I said, "What in the world are you talking about? I can't do that. I don't know anything about broadcasting." And he said, "Well, what else are you going to do?" And kind of it was a dare and a humiliation and all that. It was, and I said, "I don't even know how I get an interview." So he got an interview for me.
Mm.
And with the news director, I went in and thinking, at least I did that. Now I can go home and he'll leave me alone. I was hired that day. I did not expect it. I would never even raise my hand in class. I'm actually an extreme introvert. And I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. And I had to go in the next day and they wanted me to record a show.
Oh.
Not record, live. This is live TV. There was no recording. With no training, there are no words to tell you how terrified I was. I couldn't eat. My whole digestive system wasn't working well, as you know. This can happen. And I was looking at the wrong camera because I didn't even know what the red light was, that was the camera that was on. I actually burped during the show. It was on live TV. It was so awful. I thought, okay, that will take care of it. No, no, they wanted me to stay on, and then what they were trying to do is prep me to, become one of the first female, sports anchors in the country. There was only one other one, I think two others at the time, and so over the course of time, that is what happened. So basically, my soul group, my guides were just egging me on to get experience. It didn't matter what I was talking about. It was just to get comfortable in front of the camera, and every time something would happen where I'd be written out because they were reducing the show to one anchor when I was a news anchor, and of course they told me directly, "You're good, but you're a female. We can't keep you. We have to keep the guy." So I was living during those days of broadcast. I thought, "Finally, I'm out of this thing," and then something else would happen. And so finally I thought, you know what? I think I'm supposed to use this medium that I've trained now for years in. And I think I'm supposed to use it for something more meaningful. And that's when I started taking it. And I went to PBS and did a good amount of work with them doing documentaries, did a vegetarian cooking show for years. And it was successful. And then I was looking about 2002 to try to get through a show called UFOs Hard Evidence on PBS, and they had agreed to it in concept. So it was a process throughout my life of just kind of pushing the envelope with alternative messages using PBS because I'd had some success with them, with my documentary work as the vehicle. And then finally I had to go out on my own. And that's when all this crazy stuff began.
Do you think that you have in your pre-birth contract that you are supposed to be some sort of disseminator of spiritual information?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, whenever I talk to these various soul groups, they'll tell me that whether I like it or not. They'll just blurt it out at some point. Yes, absolutely. The television was the medium for me, because I think to start with, if I had appeared like Madame Zelda, so to speak, no offense to all the wonderful Madame Zeldas, but if I had appeared like that, um, people would not have taken this information as seriously. I think I actually had to have a professional air about me and kind of look like a news lady, so that I could start doing this metaphysical information. Because when Scott Meredith and I started it, there was no video streaming of it at the time. It didn't really exist yet. So we were out there on our own and paid for everything ourselves. And I've told this story a couple times now, which I never had till recently. We just waited until we put the site up, and initially it was called Broadband Learning Channel. We quickly changed it to Conscious Media Network, but we waited and someone found us out there in the world of the internet. And he was saying, "Come here, come here." And we had one viewer. So I don't know who that person was that would have been one of the first viewers in the world to stream metaphysical information. I wish I knew who they were, but that's how it started. And then they would tell someone. There was no social media, we didn't have marketing. And so by word of mouth, we grew Conscious Media Network. And we would travel to all of the events. I was a pretty voracious reader, so I'd read the books, go to the events, interview. Back then, Greg Braden was one of the first people I interviewed. And so it grew from there at all of these various events. Stuart Hameroff, we know him and his work in science now with microtubules. And I think I did the first video interview with Bruce Lipton. So this is way back when, old school on the
Yeah.
ground, throw the lights up, person to person.
I think you've known Lee for quite a long time.
About 10 years now.
What is it about the Z's that intrigued you so much that you wanted to do a book about them?
Well, I appreciated the fact they would, they know Lee's audience, they know my audience, so they know who they're speaking to. And I appreciated the fact that they would step forward into some of the edgier stuff that I wanted to go into. And because sometimes the groups will not do that. They stay very focused on a certain demographic or group of people that needs that messaging. And I loved the flexibility of the Z's because I feel that Lee is actually a true clear channel. I appreciated the fact that they would go with me into some edgier topics, and they know me well. You can tell from the book. They know me pretty well.
Mhm.
And I'm always trying to get stuff out of them that they won't comment on. But this time they went pretty far. They went pretty far. And I think they went far enough to both enlighten, intrigue, and probably scare the bejesus on a couple of pages out of people, which is what I wanted. I wanted not to scare people, not at all. It's not a frightening book. It's a very hopeful book about our future. And I knew that they would go there. So there's some edgy topics in there, and they went there. And I love that about them.
Well, what are some of the most surprising or shocking things that you learned from the Z's when you created this book?
The details are the surprise to me. A lot of the concepts I asked about is because I had been chatting with my own soul group for years about some of these concepts about our future, and I knew that we were going to land ultimately in a good place just from my dialogues with them and from some of the people that I've interviewed. And so I thought, let's take it down that road, but go into the details of it. And it's the details to me that were the most surprising. And for example, in the opening of the book where I got dizzy initially, um, we're talking about consciousness. And they were saying that consciousness rules now. And this is very interesting that we all tend to think hierarchically because we've been made to, that there are beings who've been controlling this planet and essentially keeping the governors over human beings, keeping us limited in many, many ways. That's all true.
Mm.
I don't spend a lot of time there, just because I think anyone listening to this knows that the human species has had some intervention that is not desirable for many, many thousands of years. And every channeled group that I speak to will say, yes, that is true, including my own group. Yes, that is true. They don't like really naming it. They don't like talking about it a lot. They'd rather we focus on the solutions rather than any kind of entities or energies that are attempting to continue controlling us, because the consciousness that's moving in now is changing all of that. And they said consciousness itself is in control. And the confusing part of that creates such chaos for people, they said, is that our conscious minds cannot keep up with uh, what's going on. I mean, every day we look at, you can open, doesn't really matter, any kind of app and look at the headlines and you're like, holy cow. It's just like, you're overwhelmed. It's like, I need to go back to bed just to settle with that. And they're saying, yeah, your mind's not going to be able to keep up because everything is moving at such a rapid pace. And any entities or group or individuals that are going to continue to limit human beings will not be allowed. It can't exist on Earth because Earth herself is going through this consciousness shift. The whole cosmos is. All the planets surrounding us are. Every sentient being upon these planets are going through this shift, whether we like it or not, because consciousness is in control. And so, because I had said at one point, are there like any group of entities that are kind of overseeing this awakening? And they said, no, that's an old hierarchical way of thinking that we have been trained to think that some other beings are above us, that are more powerful than us, better than us, and that they're going to shepherd us through. They said, you have plenty of guidance. Everyone has guidance. We know that. We're surrounded by guidance. And good guidance plays fair. They whisper to us. Sometimes, they'll club us over the head if it's right there and we're not paying attention. But by and large, good guidance is always there to assist us into an upward journey. And if you're starting to get a lot of negative interference, those are not your good guides. And there's that there. That exists too. So I'm all about the beauty of the human species. My group of souls is about that. The Z's are all about the fact that this is an incredibly unique species. And so they doubled down on that throughout the book, which I really appreciated, and then talked about the ways in which this is true.
When you say consciousness is in control, is that individually, collectively?
Collectively.
Collectively. Even
There's a new consciousness that is moving in and through. We have waves of consciousness that evolve, help us evolve and then devolve. I mean, this has always been the case, and we're in an evolving state of consciousness. We are in a field of evolving consciousness at this time, which simply means those waves that we ride, just like the cells in the body. You have cells born and cells die through those normal anabolism, catabolism processes. It's the same thing with universes. They're born and then they peter out. They serve their purpose, they learn, and then the intelligence that lives there. We are bodies of intelligence and mind. We can go ahead and transcend that when this part is over for us. When we've learned what we can, when we've contributed what we can, this will go on, but it doesn't mean that we stay with it. We can transcend that and move on. And that is the idea for every being, to transcend wherever they are, ultimately through their own curiosity, their own learning, and essentially embodying the new things that they've learned. Whatever we've learned that's refining the consciousness in ourselves will allow us to move on out of here if we wish. I think Earth is beautiful. I'm not moving on anytime soon.
Well, as a YouTuber or someone who puts YouTube content up, you know that people love to hear about what's coming over the next year or what's going to happen in 2025. What did the Z's say about that?
Well, one of the most interesting things they said that was a surprise. We're going back to your list of surprises. They said um, predictions will not work as well now.
Hmm.
Consciousness is in control. Things are moving much faster and differently than they have in the past, and that will increase. And as a result, if people are trying to put time frames on anything, they're certainly just as likely to be wrong. So it'll be a 50-50 guess. And with that said, they said, we will say, however, that over the next decade or so, and this was recorded in, the book was recorded a year and a half ago in the latter part of 2023. They said that you're going to see tremendous chaos, uh, the crumbling of institutions and ways of thinking, but this isn't a bad thing. This is a necessary thing. And then the rebuilding from the ground up of these same things with much more innovation, creativity, intelligence, and love. So what we have to look forward to is beautiful if we don't allow ourselves to be in the trap of hanging on to the familiar, because the familiar isn't going to feel the same for much longer.
Yeah. The only problem is sometimes when you are not hanging on to the familiar, it's uncomfortable.
Very. It's uncomfortable for all of us. Okay, so then that's a very good point you bring up because it's so true and it's universal. Humans don't like change. I mean, there are a few, Richard Branson, I'm sure he lives for change.
Mhm.
Yeah, jump off the tallest, this, whatever. He's living for change. And there are people who are adventurers who can't get enough change.
Mhm.
Uh, high risk, they like to take risks. But for most of us, for most people, we'll do that to an extent, but we have to have something that we can call home. We have to have a home place base either inside ourselves or in the tribe around us. And that's what we're seeing now is a doubling down on trying to affiliate with tribes because we feel like we're losing our bearings. And I can say this because I thought it was interesting. I was meditating about a week ago because I've been doing these podcasts now and just kind of reflecting on things. And I got this information about exactly what you're talking about that made so much sense and it's so simple. And what was being said or told to me, whether it's from my higher mind or a guide at that moment, I don't know, it doesn't matter, was that because humans are uncomfortable with the unknown, if we could do one thing to help ourselves, and that is when we're confronted with something new, a new concept, a new challenge, new whatever, is to just new bit of information, just back up a bit, sit with it, and the book gets into this a lot. Use our body as our tuning fork and don't buy it right away, even if it's from our tribe or what we feel is a trusted source. No, back up. Let your body discern this for you. Drop it down. Feel how it is in the stomach, in the heart. Your stomach is going to tell you before anything how you feel about something. And it's a really good idea to learn about butterflies versus fear, the difference between the two in the stomach. There is a difference. And so it was just saying, be comfortable with not knowing for a while, no matter what it is. Roll it around, listen to some other people, observe, see how your body's feeling. And when you feel ready, then make your mind up on how you feel about something. You can say your mind, your body, your heart. Then you can choose how you want to engage with that. And if you want to take a position on it, it's coming from a much more solid place than just for a quick fix, grabbing your tribe's point of view. That is not working at all. Look around the world. It's creating hatred, it's creating division. It leaves people so ripe for misinformation and disinformation that it's shocking. And so not to buy into this, let go of your tribe a little bit enough to do some thinking of your own. This is critical thinking is all but lost now. And I'm really big on logic and critical thinking, but as run through the tuning fork of the body, because your heart and your guts will give you the rest of the information.
Well, is this how the Z's are telling people how to discern from fraud and conspiracy theory?
Yes, they are. They're very big on this as well, and I was so happy that they talked about it in the book. Are what's ultimately going to happen that they talk about that makes, I think, the human species so incredibly unique is that we are now on the path with this consciousness that's moving through. We can't avoid it. It's saturating us. It's saturating everything. As this consciousness moves through, it's going to begin bringing our higher mind and our heart in together in a complex that the mind runs through. And I think this is incredibly important. Yeah, about 30 years ago, my soul group, I was talking to the lead person being one time and said, "What's coming up? I mean, with the human mind." And they said there will come a time in your lifetime where people are not going to be able to discern fact from fiction. They won't be able to tell what's true and untrue. We can tell now we're reaching that period. Would you agree with that, Jeff?
Yeah, just look at your Facebook feed.
Exactly. So they warned me about this a long time ago. And so if this is true and we have reached this time, then we have to say, so how will we be able to tell truth? And according to them and according to the Z's, I 100% agree. Your body will tell you. I have been present at a joint experiment between HeartMath and then a very brain state technology, very advanced at the time. So the person was hooked up to heart electrodes and brain electrodes, and they were exposed to pictures, situations, uh, animated uh, uh, little films that were going on to see what responded first. And it was so interesting. That's the first time I saw with my own eyes that the heart would respond just a nanosecond before the brain responded.
Hmm.
So the heart knows what's going on. The heart has vast intelligence. The stomach has vast intelligence.
Um,
So if we start using our body, so you can take anything you're seeing on Facebook, disassociate from your tribe and those false senses of security, and just take it in for what it is. Run it down into your stomach. Take that thought and gently run it down into your heart. Is this true? How does that feel if I embrace that? You'll be surprised. You might come up with a very different answer than you would expect. And we're going to be doing this by rote. This is our future. Our entire being is wired and filled with intelligence. And we're not going to rely on this tiny little thing called the conscious mind. That is the dumbest part of our being. I don't care how high your IQ is. It's the dumbest part of our being in terms of it's being able to assess truth and higher truths in particular because it is so programmed. It can be programmed so easily. It's being programmed easily. It's running through all these filters. And then, of course, you have the participation of the subconscious mind, always programming it.
Regina, near-death experiences are a huge topic.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes.
Well, what do the Z's have to say about death and its inevitability?
Oh, they say it's just a shame we're so afraid of it.
Mm.
They treat death as it's just another transition. And they say that people are so unnecessarily afraid because you continue no matter what. And so I think the value of near-death experiences, and the people that you've had on, and I've seen that you've had quite a few on with near-death experiences, is that they live through them. And that's important because they got to go over or get at least a glimpse of the other side that, oh my God, I'm fine. With or without a body, I'm just fine. And then bring that message back, like Anita Morjani. She was on death's doorstep, and she understood this message about love. She embraced it and came back and has lived for many years to tell the tale of what happens and how beautiful it is. And most people that go through a near-death experience don't want to come back. So it should give us a hint right there that this is a very beautiful passage. And I don't think there's anything that's not filled with grace when it comes to death. People think, oh my God, but the pain, the moment of death. Well, I think most people are well out of their body by the time that happens. They're safely alive and well on the other side, and I've been with a few people in that state, and it's just a matter of the body just giving up the ghost of the last breaths for that expression in this tiny time frame that all of our souls have been occupying. Just as just one little pixel of our soul's experience, and just think pretty soon you're going to have a little bare baby bud again and have to start it all over again for the most part, for most people. They're going to choose to incarnate again. Not everybody.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I saw on your YouTube channel that you have a video about reincarnation. And I wanted to know whether you think that it is optional or we are forced to do it over and over again.
Absolutely optional. And every group of souls I have spoken to, every one of them say the same thing. There are beings lined up to have this experience. We're not a normal species. We don't have time to get into that. I could get into it from my own soul group's point of view that they've shared with me through the decades, which is a slightly different understanding of what a human being is. But it's a longer backstory about our origins and such. But one thing is certain, what happened here on Earth to create the human species is not normal. It is like an ongoing experiment. It wasn't intended that way to begin with, but it became an experiment. And you're talking about taking a very advanced, and I don't like the word advanced, a highly creative, highly intelligent being, more non-physical in nature, and blending it with this, our earth suit, a creature that had its own soul and its own mind. So and maybe another time we can talk about that, the story of the birthing of the merging of the human being. So everyone's a hybrid. I mean, there's no way. And the Z's, they all the groups talk about this. Yeah. So when we're looking at how these beings came to be and the notion of our moving through from incarnation to incarnation, they say it's a gift to yourself to incarnate on earth. This is not okay. This is the thing. Okay. So let's just get into it. People call this a prison planet. There are beings who have definitely tried and succeeded in taking over a good amount of the functions on this planet. I don't like what they're doing. What they're doing is dishonest, uncaring, greedy, selfish, and for their own purposes. Let's just get that on the table. We know those beings are here. We know they're hidden in the shadows. We know David Icke, my friend, and others talk about these beings quite a bit. They're here. They're doing what they're doing. But we are not giving ourselves credit for the incredible creative beings that we are just because we've been completely overwhelmed by all this garbage. But it's just garbage. It's just a crusty layer. All we have to do is start flicking it off through waking up, and we start emerging into the incredibly powerful beings that we are. So these beings that we are and the other beings that channel this information, say it's a real honor and privilege to incarnate on Earth. And the beings who have not incarnated here, who are guiding us, watch with absolute fascination because this is not an easy journey. It takes a courageous soul to continue incarnating here, but you can learn so much so fast. And there's so much beauty and so much joy to be had as well. The whole enchilada, it all plays on Earth. And so you do not have to ever incarnate. No one has to incarnate. No one has to incarnate back here. Basically, if you wish to incarnate, you can incarnate in any realm on any planet that is a match for your vibrations or your frequencies. It's all just a frequency game, no judgment.
Well, let me ask you a personal question. Are you coming back next time?
Yes, I already have plans. Apparently,
Hmm.
I've already made some arrangements.
Yeah.
According to my soul group, have arrangements for a couple of lifetimes. The projects I'll be working on have already been laid out. The characters should be incarnating about the same time. So yeah, I'll be back.
Well, I ask that question quite often, and in the comments, you'll see that people will over and over say, "I'm not coming back again," which means to me that many, many people are suffering out there.
People are suffering. It's hard here.
Did the Z's say anything within this book how to relieve your suffering?
That's a huge question. First of all, why are you suffering?
Yeah.
This takes you to the roots of your soul and who you are and your subconscious mind, what you're choosing to align yourself with, how you're choosing to use your mind emotional bodies. That that is where we all have to go to examine that. We're a multidimensional being that has all these uniquely separate aspects to ourselves. The way the higher mind works, the way the soul works, that complex is one thing. The way the lower mind and subconscious work is where that they collaborate together. And there's a great misunderstanding about the subconscious mind. It's like, oh, that's coming from the subconscious. The subconscious is nothing more than our library. It's a library that contains past experiences. It has the memory of every event that has happened to us as a soul as we've traveled along. And many of us have been on lots of other planets. This isn't the first stop. Even if we've been here millions of years, this isn't the first rodeo for us. So we have brought with us a collective of memory that now what you're seeing is what we have come to as a saturation of our really more recent past experiences, but some are quite distant too. So if you have, for example, and I hope I'm not offending anyone here, we all have to take this on individually. We have to be kind to ourselves. Earth is not an easy journey. We've been through some pretty dark, primitive times. We've come out into, right now, the most enlightened time we've been in a very long time. And when I say that, there are ancient cultures, ancient Atlantean cultures that were quite beautiful, Lemurian cultures that were quite beautiful, early Egyptian cultures that were quite beautiful. And we're coming out of that after probably the last deluge, and then the final destruction of Atlantis really kind of knocked us for a loop as a species. Some of that higher information was able to travel, to the British Isles, to Europe, to uh, the Central American cultures and such. But by and large, we kind of had to start over. So we've been through a little bit of a primitive ride for the last 10,000 years or so. But we're now reaching, I would say, the highest place we have been by far. And we like to denigrate ourselves and say we're this primitive species. Oh my God, among the species out there, we're the worst. No. In fact, I specifically asked the Z's about that. We are not. And I said, well, what about war? Because who wants war anymore, except for the people at the top and those unseen ones they collaborate with because there's some profit to be had on one level or another. The rest of us don't want war. And they said, you're moving beyond that. As a species, you're moving into a post-war planet. But those beings are not going to give that up easily at all. So here we have this incredible species ready to move beyond violence that's still being squeezed to the very last breath to get money out of us for war cultures, for war machines, defense budgets. It's completely outdated. Anyway, I went on a bit of a tangent. So get back to what you just asked me so I can round myself back up again.
Well, I was going on the tangent with you, and I forgot where I was. But let
We
me,
went on a ride together.
yeah. Well, let me direct you in this way. What do the Z's have to say about AI and Neuralink and things like that?
Okay, one of the most surprising things in the book to me was they said, well, AI has visited the Earth and most all of the planets many times before. This is nothing new, but we have to remember our antiquity. We had very advanced cultures millions upon millions of years ago, and many hundreds of thousands of years ago. We had advanced cultures here on the planet. There's always been air travel, for example. We think, God, how did that artifact that seems like it's from here end up over there? Someone dropped it there. So when you look at the fact that we've always had other cultures here interfacing with us, moving around, flying populations of people around, moving them, artifacts around, you just get comfortable with that first. You can see how this is not the most intelligent we've ever been technologically. So AI, they said, has been underneath it. It's been on Earth many times before, but never has it been on Earth with this large a population and so many interfacing with it. So they said the key here is to one thing, like with all things, have a curiosity about it. Engage if you wish to the degree that you wish to, totally under your control. Do not have fear of it. They said when we start fearing it and allowing it to enter in unbidden is where you have problems. And arguably, we can say it's unbidden with all of us. Anyone who has devices has AI inserting itself into our lives now, manipulating us here and there, just the algorithms alone to get us to buy this, buy that, open this, click on that. To me, I find abhorrent. And so we're at a point now where they say AI is creating a great deal of fear. Back off a bit. Again, use your body, use your whole being to sense, where will I engage with it? Am I going to let it do creative processes for me? Do I feel good with that? Okay, do it. See how it feels. See what happens with it. Watch your own being. If you're going to use it for creative purposes, then watch and see if your own creative abilities start atrophying or become enhanced. You have to judge for yourself how that AI is affecting you internally on a very personal level. And if you're a parent, then of course you have bigger decisions to make about your children and how much you're going to let them interface with it and on what level. So they say be curious about it, engage where you wish, don't be afraid of it, but that in another 10 years or so, it will become more of an issue in that it will appear to be self-aware. And then we're going to have to make some clearer decisions en masse about it.
It sounds like to me from what you're saying that we've had great civilizations in the past. What
Yes.
happened to them? Like did they destroy themselves? And if so, how will we keep from destroying ourselves?
If we're looking at Lemuria, we're talking very, very ancient past. We're more or less the beginning of, again, in the story I know of our origins, this had very much to do with varying degrees of frequencies coming together that ultimately created what we know as the human being. And at that time, it was so long ago that the frequencies themselves were different. So what we felt as a density now did not feel the same a billion years ago. It didn't feel the same. It would be a very different reality. You would be able to see into dimensions we can't see now. As the Earth ultimately became solid and started forming into the density we know now, the third dimension. Okay, those beings that came with it did so, some by choice, some not by choice, the ones that were going to ultimately become the human species. We have hybridization happening. We have beings coming and going. We have many beings from other places that are here now because AI has popped through that are starting to incarnate in the human species that haven't incarnated here before. And like they say in this book, people over the next 20, 30, 40, 60 years, we're going to see much more diversity in the way, not just the way people look, the variations in our heights, statures, and so forth, but in the way we feel toward one another, the way we experience one another. I'm not speaking emotionally, but more of a frequency thing. We're going into a more diversity as a result of souls from other places coming in at a key period of our history to help us really take on the challenge of AI, ultimately learning to use it correctly so it does not take over our decision-making capabilities en masse or individually. That's going to be our choice, by the way. It's not a given at all. It's our choice. So there are beings that are skilled in this, that are incarnating now, young people that are going to be kind of massaging that and helping us. And they said there are even going to be some incredible counter movements from some of the young people that are super skilled, wherever they've come from in AI, that are going to be making plays against the prevailing AI on humans' behalves. So it's kind of a wild show. I think it's exciting.
Well, do you ever foresee a time when AI will get so powerful and robots will get so human-like that people will start having relationships with AI over with each other?
Absolutely. Of course that will happen. We don't have to look too far. I mean, that'll be driven some by sex. Have you seen the show Humans?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that's not in anyone's imagination.
Mhm.
This has occurred before. However, the human species, and the Z's are very clear about this, the beauty of the human species, the uniqueness is our hearts, our feelings, and our emotions. It can appear to be like us, but it will never organically be us. And so we have to make a choice. Do we want to engage organically with life and each other? Or do we want to go to some perfect Cupid doll, preferential version of a human that does everything we want? That's going to be our choice.
It kind of sounds like what you're talking about is a simulation in a way. And some of your guests, who happen to be my guests, also believe that we live in a simulated reality. What is your take on that?
I don't view it in the same way. If if you're talking about artificial elements that have inserted themselves in, if you're talking about beings who are trying to control, you could you could call it a simulation. But the reality is, our lives, our being, our place on this planet is not a simulation. This is our life. We incarnated into a physical body with a soul. This is our experience. And our experience is created by this matrix of all these levels of mind. You have the higher mind constantly whispering, trying to draw us forward into what the soul uniquely chose to express or learn in this lifetime. Here you have the subconscious trying to protect us. Literally because of experiences of the past where we may have been in danger. Its job is to protect us. It's survival. That is the whole point of the existence of the subconscious. Then you have, as I said before, the conscious mind that's pairing up with that fear-based, survival-based subconscious mind. So if you look at it in that way, you could say that that we're just a program operating. If you believe that there's nothing more than the subconscious mind driving you, then you could say that this is a simulation and you're no different than a bot yourself, but that's not the truth. People have extraordinary amounts of courage and creativity and love and compassion and beauty inside them en masse. And so if you want to sidestep that, you could say this is a simulation, but you can't sidestep it. We are this incredible matrix of this sensitive vehicle that can feel our way, that can project our consciousness out into the universe. Many people are skilled remote viewers, for example. We are going to all be able to have these developed skills in the future where we can sense ourselves out wherever we wish. We can fall in love. We can, I always say we can taste salted caramel ice cream and be totally in joy over that. No, these things that are made of artificial intelligence will not have these experiences. And as the Z said repeatedly throughout the book, the thing that will distinguish us from anything else is this incredible heart capacity we have to run our intelligence through the heart. And they said, when it comes down to it, the thing that matters more than anything is not your conscious thought, it's your feelings, not your emotions, your feelings.
Earlier, you said that you were able to ask the Z's some edgy questions. And I think this is a great one to ask you. And I want to know, what did they say about the breakdown of fixed gender roles?
Oh, this was a fascinating part of the book. So now, mind you, I don't have the entire book memorized, but I know it pretty well. I've read it a few times myself. There's so much in it. So, what they said, and I'm giving a synopsis, is that some we were talking about what we were talking about is population replacement initially, and that there would come a time that it seems we have approached a time we're going into population reduction. And I've been aware of that for quite a while, and they said, "Yes, we are, especially over the next 10 years, we're going into population reduction." And we can kind of see how this is happening, where devices, you know, how people are siloing themselves in little comfort zones, and they're not getting together in the same way physically, you know, like before. Like when I was young, that was kind of your sex, drugs, and rock and roll time. Procreation was not an issue. It's how can we not procreate while we're having fun, right? Now, probably the fastest growing, certainly one of the fastest growing medical procedures is in vitro fertilization. And there's a reason. Our bodies are not as capable of procreating, certainly in the Western world. Our populations are kind of dropping like a stone. The population with the least replacement level of people is South Korea. And I found out the other day I was being interviewed, and she said she had read that South Korea had the highest usage of devices, you know, devices, phones, etc., and smartphones. And I said, "Isn't that interesting? I just read that they have the lowest level of population replacement at 0.7. You need 2.1 just to continue the population. Many countries are at 1.2, etc., even lower, and they're the lowest at 0.7, and they have the highest engagement with all of these devices." So I was concerned about that, and that's why I asked that question. How is this going to go when we don't need each other? And then you get virtual realities, VR goggles involved for young boys, and you already have a lot of porn out there. You don't need a real girl. And now if we get robots, you really don't need a real girl. So what's happening to replacement? And then we started in on the subject of um, that's one thing where we went down that road, and I said, and then also we have much broader expression that will lead to a lack of procreation too, such as what happens with transgender when the person can no longer reproduce and or doesn't, it's biologically not possible at that point. If we have more people that are going into the area of altering the physical body so it's no longer able to reproduce. So I'm looking at it from a very pragmatic population level, and then we got into it more psychologically. And they were saying that many of the people who have chosen transgender to switch sexes biologically have done so. They've come here as kind of way showers. And it's very, very courageous. It's a hard dance to do. We all know that it's a hard dance to do. We've heard the statistics in terms of what happens with depression and so forth. And to be compassionate and respectful for the way showers who are trying to break down the hard lines between the polarity of the sexes. Because in fact, they said the sexual energy is very different than we see. It's not just this person in a female body has feminine energy, this guy has masculine energy. And I was quite shocked when they used me and Lee as an example. And I thought I didn't ask that. They just said it anyway. So Lee and I have our relationship where I'm like digging down, asking questions, and he's like, "Well, let's have a glass of wine." And Lee is also gay. And so they said, well, for example, in your relationship with Lee, you're 70% masculine and he's 30% feminine. That's how the energy's running between the two of you. And I thought, I didn't know that. And they said, yes, every time when you interact with a different person, you're displaying a different level of masculine versus feminine energy, depending on the dynamic with that other person. And to choose to change your body radically, they said many of the people are very courageous for doing this, just to start breaking it down so we can get used to more nuanced expressions of male and female, of sexuality. And then they said, many of the people, however, were doing this because they had been pressured by peer groups in society, and that this was not a good idea, and that you really to go through the full effect of change of the body, it's best to do that when the brain is fully developed, which would be toward the middle to latter 20s. So they said, as a practical measure for people considering this change because it's irreversible, wait until the brain's fully developed. You've landed there and you know this is what you want, and then go for it. But not to get kind of either encouraged or bullied into it while you're too young, because oftentimes there are problems with that later on. Depression can happen, especially if you were so young you really weren't ready, and later on say, God, now I can't go back. And there's some of that going on. There's everything going on with it. But it was mainly to talk about the fact that we need to be compassionate with each other, stop the judgment, learn to see people in all kinds of expression. They said that's what's coming up. So these are way showers. The ones that chose it, incarnated to do it, are the way showers, and to respect that and be compassionate about this. So it was very practical. And then they said in another 60 years or so, the technology medically, the technologies will be available for the people to have a much easier, more successful transition, that we're technologically really not quite there yet. That'll be a little while longer, a couple generations, for those who still choose to do that at that time. In fact, there's going to be explosion of so many medical technologies. They said it's just so exciting.
As someone who has children, what kind of parenting advice do the Z's have for me?
Okay, one of the things they were really clear on, depending on how old your children are, I mean, it's moving really fast now. So we have the little alpha children, we even have little betas being born now. And then, of course, the Z's, who are now about 27, the older ones coming into their own. Their brains are fully developed. And so they said that with the little ones now, many of the beings coming in are wired more sensitively, because we're moving into a quicker, more responsive, more sensitive world. Like they said, war will ultimately be going away. That's not a forever thing here, because those who control are not going to be able to continue controlling with this level of consciousness present. So these beings coming in are coming into the new world of a more sensitive form of expression. And so that might show up as being maybe a little on the spectrum, or maybe just being super kind of emotional, just startling easily and having more severe emotions than you might expect. And they said, just be aware of this, love them through it, but not to coddle the new generations. They said, you don't need to coddle them, because the beauty of the new generation coming in is a very high percentage are coming in with awareness of their soul purpose. Unlike my generation and generations past, they're actually coming in with awareness of their purpose. So they're not here to mess around. They're quite sturdy souls. They're just wired a little more sensitively, and the sensorial aspect of life on earth can overwhelm them a bit. Just be sensitive to that. Yeah.
What's the most important takeaway someone should have from reading your new book, The Future Human?
That we are actually quite a beautiful species. And I know where I was going in a comment earlier about the war thing, where I took us down a rabbit hole. I had asked the Z's, we're just an incredibly violent species. And they said, no, there are, they said, we'd put you somewhere in the middle. There are places and planets that are far more violent than you. He said, no, don't assume that. So that's a good thing to know. But I think for us to understand that we're an incredibly, I said this before, a unique species, many species throughout the universe are watching us. And even toward the beginning of the book, they're saying this experiment is such that you're actually moving in this direction. As you in this dense environment where we basically have to live through gravity and space and time and everything, or the perception of it, and create through that, that when we're able to embody that heart-centered intelligence and these degrees of compassion and incredible degrees of creativity that many other species are envious of, quite frankly. We're a very creative species. When we can embody that in the flesh, we will be something that many beings observing us are hoping to be able to seed on other planets, to have a physical life form with this degree of beauty and intelligence and creativity and love and compassion and feeling that is desirable, that this experiment succeed now, because this is others are looking for us to succeed so we can take that to their planets, and we'll be able to create with our minds. We are creating every moment with our minds. We're This whole thing is nothing but mind. We do know that by now. So we're going to be able to consciously create with our minds. Human beings, you could take us somewhere else down the road in the future a bit, and we could use our experience for, they use trees. They talk a lot about trees. I love trees. I asked about trees. And we can take the template of a tree through our own experience and feeling of it and interchange with it. And with our minds begin creating these species of trees, for example, on another planet with our own minds and our creativity. So we are not a species that should cower to any other species, never put ourselves below another species. Don't worship. You can give love and gratitude anywhere you wish to anyone and all these wonderful guides that are helping us. And my soul group is very clear on this. But never worship and give your power away and your fealty to anything else. You need to keep that sovereignty, keep your own perspective, keep your own mind and your own creativity to yourself. And the Z's are very clear. This is where we're headed. We're a magnificent species. We're not a horrible species.
If people want to find out more about your book, should they go to Amazon or a website?
Amazon and any major bookseller should have it. Yeah, it's there. And also the audiobook. And the audiobook is the original voice recordings
Oh,
with
wow.
me asking the Z's these questions. So that will have some subtle information embedded in there too.
That's
I'm a
amazing.
reader, so I read it. I mean, I have my copy. I think I'm on my fourth or fifth reading. But for people who like audiobooks, it's a trip.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody doing that,
Yeah.
putting the live channeling in the audiobook.
Yes, it is.
That's
So
amazing.
you might get the chills and find yourself a little out of body.
Are you still posting content regularly on your YouTube channel?
I am. I kind of backed off the last month or so because I'm doing a transition more toward commentary. It's just for me more efficient to take a subject and drill down into it without having to try to draw that information out of another guest. I've been surfing these waters for many decades, and so I feel comfortable now putting together my own thoughts on certain subjects and sharing them, like the little reincarnation video you saw. So I'll be doing more of that now. And
Well,
still doing my interviews with Gaia and an occasional interview on my site.
well, what else are you working on that you want us to know about?
Oh gosh, most things that I'm working on, even with Gaia, I'm moving towards some commentary there. And then there's an exciting new show that we're going to be doing in 2026. But yeah, we haven't done the pilot yet. We're going to be doing that in May, so I can't talk about it yet. But we're going to do a new format for this kind of information to be able to have a place where we can come together and use critical thinking and discernment and be able to tackle the most challenging subjects. That's my desire, to be able to stay calm, to be respectful, and to look at both sides evenly and clearly. And so we're going to be doing that.
Regina, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a
Mm.
last positive message?
It is not easy living on Earth, yet what it offers is so beautiful in terms of our potential to learn millions of things in one incarnation. And so when we stumble and we don't get it right, when it looks like people around us are stumbling, I think the most important thing is for us to just sit back for a second and give ourselves some credit and just say, hey, you know, it's okay. We stumbled this time, but this is all learning. We'll do better next time. And when we find that we're gracious and caring for ourselves, when we can cut ourselves a little slack, that's the thing that allows us to do the same for others. If we can't do it for ourselves, we're probably not going to do a great job of cutting others any slack, and we don't need that right now. We need to be nice to ourselves. We need to appreciate how wonderful we are.
Regina, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been lovely being with you.
And with you as well. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.